Hey guys, Jam here. Welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm going to be trying to take a bit of a refreshy break from my usual hobby, which is mostly Space Marines. Or just any sort of like futuristic modern thing with guns and armor plates and stuff like that. Now there's a few reasons why I decided to do this. One, well, it's just nice to kind of take a break, it's like having a holiday from work kind of thing. You come back and, well, I wouldn't say you feel good coming back from holiday, so maybe it's not a great analogy there, but I just wanted a little side project to get going. And second reason is Spearhead from Age of Sigmar released a few months ago, and I thought it'd be a really great way to maybe try a new game system. Now I say new, I actually played a lot of Age of Sigmar 1, but I haven't been in it for a few years now. And my third reason is I've actually had quite a lot of Sylvaneth models lying in my cupboard for a few years now, and I thought, you know what, this would be a perfect opportunity to paint some of them up. And last little preamble before we get started, the reason why I chose Sylvaneth as well, not just because I had the models, but I thought to myself, what is the furthest I can get from a Space Marine? So no guns, no armor, nothing like that. They're literally a bunch of trees. Well, some of them are half tree, half elf. So I thought this is the furthest I can get from 40k and Space Marines possible. This will be a very different style of painting and building. And this, like I said, it's a nice little break. I kind of encourage everyone to maybe have a little refresh project every now and again. And just before anybody says anything, doesn't mean I hate 40k or Space Marines or anything like that. I have plenty of projects coming up. I still got my Horus Heresy Space Wolves I'm working on. Might do some more Dark Angels. And I've got a few, maybe more chaosy things in the works as well coming up in the next few months, maybe in the beginning of the new year. So I'm really looking forward to that. So yeah, definitely not going off of 40k in any way at all. But yeah, enough waffling. Let's get straight into this really new and refreshing project for me. Actually, I lied. One more quick thing, if you stick around to the end of the video, I'll be showing you probably the best way to transport your miniatures and just keep them safe and dust free with this big old bad boy right here. And yes, it's got LED lighting. But yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so I had all the models already built up and everything. I'm not doing any fancy, no kit bashing, just straight up tree people. Which, that in itself is already a massive refresh for me, because I usually kit bash everything. But yeah, I went straight into the basing before I could prime and paint anything, or do anything like that. And I wanted to go for a stony, wet, kind of foresty look, maybe a couple of streams in there. So I got all of my basing bits, a little bit like different size stones, grass, little bark bits, all that kind of stuff. And usually with basing, especially with bigger ones like this one here, I'll get my bigger chunks down first, so I kind of planned out where I want to roughly have things. So got this cork piece down that could either be painted up as a bit of wood later or some rock, not really sure which way I'm going to go. And once that's down, to make it kind of blend out a little bit more, I'll put a few smaller stones around that, and then I'll dunk it in some sand so that it really like fills up the gap and helps the big chunk kind of blend into the base a bit more. And speaking of gluing down little stones, I kind of had this idea of having like a stream running between his legs, and I just kind of marked that out with these pebbles. So I put lines of super glue down and put the pebbles on there, so like once again kind of making that riverbed outline. And yeah, as you can see there, we've got a nice kind of like stream pattern kind of built out, a little bit of rock in the middle there so the stream can flow around that. And I glued down one of the little critters that come in one of the Sylvaneth kits. Now, after I built up a few mounds of stones around the base, I decided to bring out my little Dremel and try and see if I can maybe Dremel out a bit of depth into the base where later my resin will go into. Now, unfortunately, this is a tiny little battery-powered Dremel, so it doesn't really do much. I should probably invest in a better one. But at the very least, at least I kind of got rid of the basey texture and gave it a bit of a different vibe. And as you can see now, I've got all the bases completely done. All the models are primed, zenithalled. Just use the rocks and bark and all that stuff to build up height and interest in the bases, and then I just cover the rest with PVA glue and sand. Right, so on to the painting. Now, this is also a completely new thing for me. I decided to use a lot of contrast paints with this, but one thing I've learned, and I'll improve for the next time, was I probably should have done a much better job with the zenithal highlight. I should have done a lot more of the kind of light grey and probably gone up to a white, because a lot of the contrast paint maybe seemed a bit too dark. There wasn't much contrast basically. I should have popped the zenithal a little bit more. But anyway, on these dudes I'm using wildwood contrast paint for all the kind of woody bark parts of all the models. And I must say, Sylvaneth are basically made for contrast paint because they got so much texture. Once again, just wish I popped the highlights a little bit more. Now, to kind of differentiate between all the different woody bits, like I said, I went wildwood green for the more armor looking solid bark bits, and then for the twiggy pokey out bits I used militarum green contrast paint. For certain areas where the kind of twigs and the bark blended a little bit, I would put the wildwood contrast paint down, and while it was still wet, then I would get the militarum green out and put on the twiggy bits, and then kind of try and blend it in that middle bit there, so they kind of blend and flow together a little bit nicer. And now going on to what I class as the kind of fleshy wood, so like the bits that are kind of under the barky armor bits. I went for Agaros Dunes contrast paint, if that's how you pronounce that. And that's all like little, like I say, almost fleshy wood bits between the joints and stuff like that. And that's basically all the wood bits done. Well, at least base coated. Now it was onto the leaves, and I wanted something to pop against all the kind of greens and browns and stuff like that, so I went for a pink. And to be honest, the leaves are such a small, tiny bit of these models, I probably went a bit too over the top. I went 3 colors, so I went completely base coating all of them with Screamer Pink, then a bigger highlight with Pink Horror, and then I went in with a small highlight of Emperor's Children. Once again, the leaves are so tiny, you probably could have skipped maybe the Screamer Pink or something. It probably would have given you the same effect. To be perfectly honest, being red-green colorblind, when I was putting the Screamer Pink down, like next to the kind of greenish brown twigs, I was like, I could barely tell the difference. I'm hoping it kind of worked. But moving on, and speaking of green, some of these models have kind of like a leafy loincloth or just like tentacles that are coming out of the Tree Lord's hand, like a few bits and bobs here and there. I'm just going to be painting straight up green. And I'll be using Warg Flesh, Warboss Green, and Scarsnake Green. So obviously base coating and then highlighting up from there. And I don't know if you noticed, but one thing I'm really trying out on this project is not using any washes. So I'm using my base coat as a shadow. So on this green loinclothy leaf thing that this guy's got, I base coat the whole thing in Warg Flesh. And then I do very like scratchy kind of highlights halfway down each of the leaves. So like half the leaf is covered in Warboss Green. Once again, these are leaves, so I'm trying to get that like rough kind of texture to them. But I'm leaving a lot of that initial base coat in there once again for the shadows and creating a bit of a transition as well. Then I do the exact same thing but on a smaller surface with the Scarsnake Green. Now I do a bit of edge highlighting with the Scarsnake just to get a bit more contrast and a bit of a pop there, but honestly I think it turned out really nice. I quite like the effect of it, and I'm really enjoying not using washes. You seem to get a different feeling from the models. Now back to the barky brown color, I highlighted up with Gorthor Brown as your kind of main highlight, and a smaller highlight of Baneblade Brown. But again, I'm trying to liberate myself from that edge highlighty Space Marine kind of thing. So, like I said a million times at this point, these guys are trees. So I'm going for a very stipply, kind of scratchy highlight, you know, adding a lot of texture in there. So I do that with all the raised edges with the Gorthor Brown. And then mostly on the kind of tippy-toppy and sharp bits of the model, I'll go in with the Baneblade Brown. Again, especially with the Beyblade, I'm just doing lots of tiny little stipples. And as you can see, at this point, I think the model's coming along quite nice, and I'm really enjoying this process. Once again, this whole complete different project for me is just feeling very refreshing at this point. But now onto the kind of twiggy, branchy bits, and I'm going to highlight up with Elysium Green and then a smaller highlight of Ogren Camo. Now, slightly different to the bark, I will be doing a bit more of a kind of edge highlighty vibe with this, more long lines to just kind of differentiate it a bit more. Not super neat and tidy, but I'm just kind of doing scratchy edge highlights along the width of all these branches and stuff like that. So yeah, not too much stippling on the twiggy bits. Now at this point, I wanted to go for a kind of a white ghostly skin, and I did a lot of like white highlights on the weapon, so later I can go over with a really super saturated blue contrast paint, but neither of those things really worked for me, so we'll be changing that later. So for the skin, I just decided to make it blend in with the rest of the kind of fleshy wood that I did on some of the other models, and I just used that Agaros Dune. And it gives them more of like an ethereal, ghosty, tree people vibe instead of just having kind of your standard white skin, I guess. And once that was dry, I went in with Tau Light Ochre, and I used that to edge highlight those kind of woody, fleshy bits, but also to layer the skin. And that's all I really did for the skin. I didn't do any further edge highlights or anything like that. I might in the future, but right now I just left it with a nice kind of smooth layering of this, and I thought it turned out quite well. Now, as for the models with hair on them, I started off with base coating them with Celestra Grey, and then I used Colia Green shade as a wash all over. I thought this would kind of give the model that elfish, ethereal vibe, while still keeping that kind of greenish, earthy tone throughout the model. And then I went back to Celestra Grey to do some edge highlighting, and then I went to Ulthuan Grey to do a smaller edge highlight, mainly towards like the ends, the tips of the hair. Now, not many of these models have antlers and stuff like that, but for the ones that do, I just went for a standard bone color. And for all the skulls and stuff throughout the entire army, I've done the same thing. I just did a base coat of Xandri Dust, then an edge highlight of Ushabti Bone, and then a smaller highlight of Screaming Skull. Nothing too fancy there, just standard bone recipe. And another thing I'll kind of just speed run through quickly is the metallic bits on this model. So I just used Retributor Gold to base coat them all. Alright, then I went back to the weapons. Like I said before, I wanted to adjust what I originally did. So I'm going to paint all the weapons completely in Fenrisian Grey. Well, not just weapons actually. I did like the instruments and any sort of like flagpoles and stuff. I wanted to go for really like pale, kind of ghostly, bluish kind of tone that really contrasts with the rest of the model. So it looks more magical. And once that was done, just in the recesses of the models, I'd go back in with some Colia Green shade again. And yeah, just recess shaded a little bit. And lastly, I went in with some Blue Horror just for a nice little edge highlight to make those weapons and everything really pop. And then lastly, but definitely not leastly, were all the kind of runes and glowy bits on the model. So I just got some white paint, watered it down quite a bit, and just painted it into, like I said, all those little runes on the bark, in the little chest cavities and all that kind of stuff where I wanted a nice greenish glow emanating out of them, giving that more magical feel to some of these models. And once all the white was in and I was happy with that, I got some moot green, so I tried to get the most saturated glowy green that I had, and watered it down quite a lot again, and it just, yeah, painted over all those white bits. So again, it really popped, has a nice little glow to it. It's probably not a really necessary detail, but I just thought it was a nice extra touch. You got those very saturated glowy greens on the bodies of the models, and you got that nice kind of grayish blue glow of the weapons. I thought it was quite a nice little contrast there. Now there's probably a few things I missed here and there, like some of the models have mushrooms on them, I just painted them red. Some of the bugs, I just painted them black. Didn't want to make the video drag too much, so at least we got the core of the process down. But yeah, now that the models are done, it's time to go back to the bases. And I wanted to go for really kind of rich, brown, kind of like really dense, soggy forest kind of vibe. So like I said, I went for rich browns, obviously the stonework, all that kind of stuff. But the main thing I want to show here was the stream. Now I could have just put resin down and it probably would have looked okay, but I wanted to give it something a bit more special. So what I did was I got Mechanicus Standard Grey, and I just started painting long wavy lines down this stream, the kind of direction I want the flow to be. Yeah, an emphasis on kind of random. I just no straight lines, just I want to make sure that it kind of looks like water just flowing down a stream. So yeah, once I got the kind of thicker lines of Mechanicus Standard Grey down, I went in with Dawnstone and kind of went over those lines again, but just maybe a bit thinner. And doing the same thing, the wavy lines all the way down, all the way up to Administratum Grey, where I did a lot more, did some streaks, but a lot more like stippling and stuff like that. Maybe it kind of looks like bubbles, something like that. And to be honest, I've never seen anyone really try and paint a stream and then put resin over it, so I kind of hope it worked out. But before the resin anyway, I went in and just washed the entire little river area with Collier Green Shade again, just to, again, give it that kind of greenish, mossy vibe to the stream, but also to tie the colors in a little bit more. And as you can see here, I just glued down loads of grass tufts, like flowers, leaves, all that kind of stuff, just to create more density and a bit more of a foresty vibe to it all. But most importantly, now I use some UV resin. Now I just squirt this stuff all over where I want the river/stream to be, and I use a toothpick just to kind of push it into little nooks and crannies where it just wasn't flowing on its own, so like between the rocks and all that kind of stuff. And I use my blue UV little flashlight thing to harden it all up. Now one thing I haven't showed in this video, which I kind of came back to later, was I did this stream for this model, but I kind of thought I kind of want the water and stuff to tie into all the models, so I went back and did little droplets of UV resin throughout the entire army, just kind of give it that raining / like I said, dense wet forest kind of vibe. So I thought it looked quite nice. I did a bit on the grass tuft, some on the leaves, just on the ground, just little puddles of water here and there, and yeah, turned out pretty well. Anyway, I've waffled way too much, and let's just jump into a nice little showcase of this completed spearhead. Well, there you have the showcase, but just before I wrap up the video, as promised, I wanted to show you guys this miniature storage case from Jukochi, I believe how that's pronounced, not 100% sure. Now, this particular case is the large storage carry case with light. Now, I've wanted something like this for years. One, it's a great way just to store your miniatures so they don't get dusty, but it's also probably one of the safest ways to travel and move your miniatures around when you're going to play games. Now, like I said, this is the large one, so it's quite big. It's quite difficult for me to showcase it with my current setup. But as you can see here, it's got quite a few little metal trays you can slide into different positions to change the height depending on how big your miniatures are. And obviously they're metal, so you can magnetize your bases. And for just when you want to show off, you can put the little LED light on as well, which is just pretty awesome. Now, the box itself kind of comes flat packed, but it's super easy to put together. It comes with all the tools and everything you need for it. You literally can get the thing together in like about 5 minutes max. Now, the other cool thing that they sent me was it actually comes with this little kind of backpack thing that you can put the case into, which comes with loads of pockets and everything. You can put rules books in and all that kind of stuff, all your gaming utensils. And like I said, it's a backpack. It's got the straps you can carry around. Yeah, it's basically the ultimate item you can have to take all your gaming stuff to the store. And once again, thank you to Jukochi for sending this out, because yeah, this is going to get a lot of use. Well, that's if I ever actually get any games in. Well, there you have it, guys. All done and dusted. And I am actually really looking forward to getting back into some 40k stuff now. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and let me know below if you guys ever have any sort of refresh projects, something that's very different to what your main projects are. So you mainly focus on Space Marines, but you like to dabble on little offshoot projects there, maybe a completely different system, different company, anything like that. Or are you just very hardcore, this is my project, this is my main army, I'm sticking with it, nothing else gets in the way kind of person. But all I know now is I need to go and paint Alariel, the Everqueen, basically the big boss lady of the Sylvaneth, because absolutely phenomenal model. I do own it, quite intimidating, but it needs to get done. But that's gonna have to wait, because like I said, it's back to 40k for me. Oh, and also let me know what you think of that little storage transporty miniature box thing, because I think it's absolutely phenomenal. It's answered all my kind of, I want to say, prayers, questions, whatever I was needing to transport miniatures around, keep them safe, so I think it's awesome. But let me know if you'll be interested in maybe picking it up or not, or something similar like that. But yeah, I'll stop waffling now. If you did enjoy the video, you know what to do. You've been on YouTube long enough by now, I'm guessing. You know, like, subscribe. I do have a YouTube membership, Patreon. But until the next one, guys, bye-bye.